continue to dissect President Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address, and some critics believe it was an attempt to attract support for ANC ahead of the elections. Dr Ebrahim Harvey, political commentator, joins us now. Dr. Harvey, thank you so much for your time. What was your take on that State of the Nation address? Do you believe that this was an electioneering by the President on behalf of the ANC?
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity. Good afternoon to the viewers. No, obviously, you might have probably read because that's exactly what I deal with in my News 24 column. You know, I took serious issue with the thrust of the SONA by our President, Cyril Ramaphosa, and pointed out sharply, in fact, the title of that piece in your column, you'll see, I said that he used the SONA not to address South Africans and the biggest crisis that South Africans generally face in every respect: load shedding, water, sanitation, sewerage, cost of living, everything is collapsing for South Africans generally. What he did, he actually turned that SONA into a largely ANC electioneering campaign speech. That is what it was largely, and really you can see the opposition in the questions they put to him in Parliament, how they were digging holes in that speech. It's pathetic, because look, Ramaphosa had to, because the elections this year coincide with the 30th anniversary of this supposed newfound democracy. He had to look like he was shining, over the 5 year. And in fact, to be honest with you, the 5 years of Ramaphosa is so dismal that the 15 years before his 5 years, might be somewhat better, honestly. And I don't want to go into it. There are leading figures in the ANC who say that during his tenure, and especially because of the New Dawn speech, this country has gone down. It's not necessarily a reflection on him because, politics is complex. But I think he contributed, unemployment, everything has worsened since Ramaphosa took office, despite his best efforts, to shine. Unemployment is at the worst ever. We have the worst unemployment, social inequalities and poverty in post-apartheid South Africa ever. In fact, and I've done many columns, and you need to do some research on it so that you know that I'm not sucking thumb. We have worse levels of black poverty, unemployment, inequalities today in the 30th year of this supposed democracy than we had during the darkest days of apartheid. Go and do your research and you'll see that. And so, he had to try to make it look like it was not, And I mean, this thing about democracy's child, Sinswalo, I mean, really how pathetic, Because, in fact, if you listen to Malema and the EFF, it is why they're going to, I think, do very well in these elections, because that's their social basis. The black youth who were born round about the time of the democracy of Mandela's release and the negotiation of the elections are worse off today than ever before. They are the ones who wallow in the doldrums of unemployment, despair, many paid to drugs, alcohol, crime in the townships. Everybody knows. You don't have to go and do research. You just need to keep abreast with the newspapers to know that this is the truth. So how he tried to turn this whole thing, it's unfortunate because you know what I think he has done? And I pointed it out in the column. I think he has done the ANC unwittingly a huge disservice in the elections that coming in May therearound. Whereas he thought he might have, raised the bar and delivered that speech in favor of the ANC and I think to the contrary. And you look at what the official opposition parties, all of them to a greater or less extent, lambasted him. They tore into that State of the Nation address. And to be honest with you, I don't want to sound, like a prophet of doom, but I think, both the 30-year period and Ramaphosa's 5-year term, leaves much to be desired. We are worse off. The Eskom load shedding crisis is worse. And in fact, water, sanitation and sewage. You need to look at this very closely. What has happened over the past 2-3 years has never happened besides Eskom and load shedding in the entire history of South Africa. Water, sanitation, sewage is collapsing across the country. It is terrible. You know, I live in Roodepoort, and the way the white Afrikaners in this area cursed the ANC, you wouldn't believe it, all over. So there's not reason to be very proud and happy about the ANC's performance, you know. And I think the SONA, the opposition parties did justice to the glaring weaknesses in Ramaphosa's SONA speech.
Dr. Harvey, I mean, even in your column you make mention, as you're mentioning now, that with the Dinswalo story, he sort of eliminated or even just blatantly ignored a lot of the damages that have been done to people that are living in townships and some of the dire situations that they face on a daily. But you also go on to speak about how Phala Phala scandal has been ignored and how he speaks of corruption, but at no point does he address or lay away the fears of South Africans with regards to that scandal.
No, absolutely. You know, I spell it out in the, and I did that deliberately. Because I'll tell you something, I think it's one thing that the opposition parties also didn't tear sufficiently into. I mean, you know, I've penned columns. In some respects, you know, Phala Phala is more scandalous, to believe me, in certain respects than was the Nkandla scandal surrounding former President Jacob Zuma. And, you know, I think it's just, you know, I think it's really, it smacks of hypocrisy of Ramaphosa. And I mean, this is the man who says, when you talk of corruption, the first accused is the ANC. Then he talks of corruption, and he doesn't even mention it, just completely leaves out Phala Phala scandal. And it's not finished, you know. If he thinks it's finished, he might be finished. It's not finished with him. It's still going to be there for a long time to come, you know. And really, there are lots of issues that arise in Phala. Criminality, corruption, how he dealt with it, you know, how he squashed it. He got the ANC to squash it in Parliament. They totally ignored the independent parliamentary support that found it a prima facie case for him to answer with full justification. And it shows you the MPs of the ANC, they never even had faith and confidence in the version of the events in Phala Phala that he gave to the panel. That's the reason why they were not prepared for a discussion and debate in Parliament. Bearing in mind, however, that it's a parliamentary report. This panel was appointed by Parliament. It's scandalous, you know. I mean, I think really, and I know Ramaphosa from 82 and numerous forms, I think the lowest point in his political career has to be Phala Phala. Absolutely, without any shadow of doubt. And I think the opposition parties didn't tear sufficiently into that gaping weakness in his SONA speech, how he neatly avoided any reference. I mean, it's just terrible, you know.
So lastly, Dr. Harvey, in the damage that you say the president could have caused for the ANC in how he articulated the last SONA, what benefit do you think it would have for other political parties in people knowing the damages that have been done to South Africa, where South Africans currently are, and in how they paint the picture as the ANC of where South Africa actually is?
Look, I don't necessarily wish the ANC, ill luck or, for objective reasons, I think it's going to do very poorly. I think you're looking at I listened today to some interviews that they say it might even dip below 40%. But what is happening, you're going to find in inverse proportion to this worst crisis that has struck the ANC at the worst possible time on the eve of this the most crucial elections and post about in South Africa is the one you're going to have in May. So I think it's done the ANC massive disservice. The biggest beneficiaries of SONA, and you can see from the opposition parties, although the EFF was not present, at that SONA speech, you're going to have the biggest beneficiaries is the EFF, this MK party that you can see how it's gaining traction. The latest polls indicate 9% for Zuma nationally and 8% for the EFF. So really, I think Ramaphosa has did the ANC a massive disservice, and the opposition parties in that order, the DA, the EFF, and particularly, who can believe what's happening to the MK party? It's unprecedented traction for a new party that has hardly come up to be polling 8, 9 to 10%. I think they're going to do very well, and in fact, in particular, in KZN. And really, I think there can't be a better time for the opposition parties to exploit the glaring crises and weaknesses in the ANC all over the country. You can see it's so tangible, the evidence, than how they're going to do in the 2024 elections.
All right, Dr. Harvey, thank you so much for your time and joining us this afternoon. That was Dr. Harvey, political commentator, speaking to us there on his take of the State of the Nation address.